topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. This is Divya, and today I've got something very, very exciting to share with you. So, I'm going to talk about kindness first today. I just want to share, just last week, it was an unusually warm day in December for us. It was in 70s, and yet, as the holidays come, I love to wear red because holiday has a way to bring cheer and joy in our lives. So I'm walking. I love to hike, and as I'm walking down the trail, I hear jingles. I'm like, okay, this is the sound of jingle, and where's it coming from? I turn around and I see these beautiful group of ladies decked in the Christmas gear, Santa hats, elf hat, and all different types. One was wearing a Christmas tree costume, one had a tutu. So really, they were laughing, and just amazing group of women. So what I did was I rooted for them, I cheered them, and I said, it's so wonderful. And I said, can I take a picture with y'all? And they said, sure. And then I got to talking to them, and it was amazing how they just opened up their group to me. And I had just started out my hike, so we hiked back and forth, and we were laughing and having this joy as if we were old friends. So the idea over here is that when you keep your heart open and when you bring that kindness in, they let me in the group, and I'm talking about them on my social media and everywhere. And see, what it does is it keeps on spreading the joy and the cheer. So I invite you to take that time, an hour a month, and help someone with no strings attached. And also, thank you for any one of you who have bought our books, Expert to Influencer, that helps you become the influencer, just not an influencer with numbers and likes and comments. You becoming an influencer that impacts somebody's life. And the Entrepreneur's Garden, whether you are an entrepreneur, corporate professional, or not doing anything, it will help you build the relationship with different things like with yourself and money and results, time in your life, so that you can live the life you deserve and you want. Let's bring in our guest, Dr. Chloe.
Hello, Divya. Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Dr. Chloe. So we usually start out from childhood because childhood usually has some good memories, or something happens in our childhood that leaves a mark on us. So do you recall a cheerful moment, a fun moment from your childhood that you still think about today and laugh about it, or think about it fondly?
Yeah, the first memory that comes to mind is sitting with my father and looking at the stars, and him teaching me about the stars in the sky. And I was always a little child, and I was very close to my father from the moment I was able to express myself. and he just loved to meet me there and talk to me about the bigger picture of life from the beginning. I remember that. So it was very fun. He was a very special man. He was a Renaissance man, and he had a lot to teach.
That's beautiful. And it's amazing how when you experience that stars have a special meaning to you because they're associated with your dad.
Yes, that's
And
right.
sounds like he's a very special man.
He was teaching me quantum physics when I was a young teenager. And at that time, I graduated from looking at the stars to understanding quantum physics with him. He was an engineer, and he was in love
So
and chemistry, and he was teaching me all this because he knew that I was thirsty for this knowledge, and he loved just to fuse it to me.
oh, that's so fantastic. A parent infusing the love of knowledge and the love of different things in their children. So did you develop an interest towards any of that?
Did I develop? I'm sorry.
Did you develop any interest towards physics or chemistry?
Yes, very much so. For me, my focus was the central nervous system, medicine, and I just love to dissect, the chicken and looking at all the bones and anatomy, and I like to look inside, just the fish, the eye, and just understand how everything is made. Look inside the dolls. There was nothing, but
Of course not. Of course not. So when you went to college, what was the focus of your studies?
I was looking always into medicine, but I did not want to become a white coat and giving prescription. I wanted more in relationship with the people, and it was interesting. It was important for me. There was more to it, and so it was not going to be the classic Western modern medicine that I was interested in. It was the real medicine and the healing aspect of medicine. That's why I'm interested in your show specifically.
And what brought on that interest? Did you have that interest since you were a child, or was it an event or a person that inspired that?
I think it was in my genes because we had a great grandfather who was a very interesting veterinarian. I had found ways to heal horses, after they got hurt. But it's more than that. It's about healing more than medicine that I'm interested in. And so, we classify healing with medicine, but really it isn't. Western medicine. I'm talking about Western modern medicine.
Right.
It's more about taking over the healing versus really approaching the true healing. And what I was always interested really is to developing the power that we're given. And my parents were very helpful in promoting that in all of us. They wanted us to become who we were meant to be. They were wonderful parents. And so for me, it's more about observing people that were not giving this this gift from parenting, not receiving this this gift, and seeing how some of the people were not developing as well as we were because they were not receiving as much as we were given. And I was kind of observing this and realizing, there's more to life, and that's really would be healing. Just that we want to become who we're meant to be, not someone else's, and just copying, the average life. We each have our own life and own gifts and talents that we're supposed to develop, and so we can become who we really are meant to be.
Very true. So tell us your journey to becoming who you were meant to be.
And the first part of your question, I'm sorry?
Tell us about your journey.
Yes.
So how did you become the person you are right now?
Okay. Well, I think I already said it. My genes and my good parents, my good, wonderful parents.
Right.
And
But then did you do any form of studies, or
That's right. Then,
what experience did you gain? How did
so
you go about it?
um, I came to America from France. That was another big step in my journey, um, because I didn't feel like I belonged in France. Or should I say, I felt like I belonged in America the first time I came to America. And then I needed to have that grassroots, that ground, based on freedom, and that if you have a will and if you have something that you want to do, you can do it in America. It was not the case in France. There's too many.
Mm.
And do this. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, there's too many no's. And the moment you come to America, it's like, yes, you can. Yes, it's possible. Yes, and I attribute it. We attribute. I think this is the reality of what America is really. It's about freedom, and to be able to become who you are meant to be. And so once I experienced and I found my freedom and the ability to become who I'm meant to be, then the doors opened, the teachers came, and the reality of my life unfolded spontaneously, organically, and pretty much it took me to understanding and discovering my own healing.
Mhm.
How can I be one person in one country and another person in another one? I can be feeling different feelings. How can my emotion be like locked and stuck? And how can I be like free to be me? Now, what is the dynamic of all of this? What's preventing me from fully feeling myself? And then how, on the other way, can I become that person? And so there was all those questions that I started asking myself early on. And I'm talking about, teenagers, early 20s, discovering that I can break through this. This is not who I am. I'm meant to be free and be able to express myself and become who I'm meant to be and help others get to that. And because if I could do it on my own, I can do it also in helping others. And so the key was when my son, Dorian, um, was born American, and I grew up in America ultimately, got married, had 2 children, and my son, my second child, was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy Duchenne, which
Oh,
is
no.
still considered an incurable illness, um,
Right.
and that life expectancy of those children, because they don't grow up to be adults,
Oh,
don't
no.
that's teenage years. And that's the worst case scenario of the muscular dystrophies. And they are about 45, probably more now, 45, muscular dystrophies. But Duchenne is considered the worst case scenario because it only addresses the boys as a DNA, and then they don't live to be past teenage years. And that's
That
pretty.
must have been so devastating for you.
It was. It was. It could have been devastating if I did not know what I had known at this point of
Mhm.
my life. That there's more to this. If Western medicine tells us there's nothing you can do, let him live a good life. He's not going to have a very long life, and
Mhm.
and there's nothing you can do. It's like, well, that's precisely when I feel that I had broken through, that there was more to what
Mhm.
we believe there were. And that's the power of consciousness. You see, that's the title of my book, Consciousness Power, Pathways to Consciousness Power. Because then what this diagnosis promoted in me was to find the teachers and the helpers and the people who could help. You know? We knew we could not get help with Western modern medicine. Okay, that was helpful because we knew they couldn't help. Then there was something else that we needed to find out, and I was going to look for it, and I was going to find out. I was determined. So I didn't look at this as something devastating. It was like, wow, this is big.
You turned it around.
This is really, this is a big deal in my life that my son may not live,
Right.
very long. We're going to enjoy this life now, and we're going to make the best out of it. And we're going to find the helpers and the teachers because we know they're there. Yeah, there was
Mhm.
in my life that there was more than the consciousness at that time knew. And because of what I had experienced before in those breakthroughs, to understand there's more than we really know.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
And from what you have shared, you have done a lot of certifications and studies in osteopath and craniosacral. So tell us, how did you apply all this knowledge for your son and how is he doing?
yeah. So the first step was osteopathy. Because I understand that osteopathy, I understood a little bit that at that point going into school, that there would be a lot of knowledge that would acquire, you know, beyond the white coat, giving a prescription, which is what I had been, my parents were kind of guiding me to this because of my interest with medicine. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted more than that. I want to understand. And osteopathy, really, we learn holistic medicine. We learn everything about everything in the human body, but we also learn techniques to facilitate the healing process, the natural
Mm,
healing process. We understand that the body is a self-corrective unit, that the body can self-heal. We know that if we cut ourselves, we don't need to maybe put a Band-Aid if it's a deep cut. If it's a deeper cut, go to the emergency room, of course, to get it healed. But ultimately, the body is going to heal on its own. Now, if you extrapolate and look at this, I'm not talking about, if you have a hemorrhage or a broken bone, it's still gonna heal on itself. But you might need to go to the doctor to make sure that it's going to heal well, to keep it mended together. But but most of the time, there's a funny story also that we learned in osteopathy college is that in the back, in the early years, if when the doctor was going, by horse, to care for the people, they had to, when they found out there was someone ill, they had to go really quickly because if they came too late, the person would have healed already on their own. So if the doctor, they wanted to be making a difference, they had to go fast because the person, or maybe will not be able to make it, who knows, but the body can heal. That's my point. And so that's what osteopathy really focuses on, is how to facilitate the healing process so the person can heal on their own and they don't need the medication, because the medication can create other problems, as we understand, more than ever.
mhm.
So the whole idea being to facilitate, not only to facilitate that healing process, but to exercise the healing process. And that's when I found, after graduating from osteopathic college, I found medical Qigong and craniosacral therapy at the same time. As soon as I graduated, my son was still, I showed him into all the top doctors and all the top osteopaths in Europe. But you know what? He still had that muscular dystrophy. I was not helping enough. So I was not satisfied enough. I had to continue to find more. And I found out about Dr. John Blanchard. Actually, I had found about him before going to osteopathic college, but I realized it was better to go to osteopathic college first and then study his work. He was an osteopath, and he had focused on craniosacral osteopathy, and looked into how to develop this work to help more people and help other people. And so he actually invited me to work with him. I had put him on the waiting list to see my son, Dorian. And I started studying his courses, Dr. John Blanchard's courses. And then when I was about to meet him, I had sent him a letter so that he could see my son earlier, because his waiting list was, 2 years, and my son needed help. And so he had read my letter before I met him in person. And then he put the pieces together that I need an appointment for my son. And then he found an appointment the following week to see him. And then during this session, he invited me to join his clinic, a staff member. And that really shifted me completely. And because I got to not only study with him on one-to-one, he got to work with Dorian regularly, often. His team worked with Dorian. So Dorian was receiving the best on the planet of what's really possible, plus a Qigong that I was studying at the same time. I knew that there was nothing more than what I had now. There was no, I continued to look around. It was like, no, that I was home with craniosacral
Mm, that's
therapy
beautiful.
and
So
Qigong.
you are home. And so
I,
tell us the difference between craniosacral and Qigong and osteopathy.
okay, very good. So craniosacral is an offshoot of osteopathy. Because osteopathy was pretty much created by Dr. Still in Kirksville, Missouri in the late 1800s, 1874. And then, which was pretty much the merging of Eastern with Western medicine, holistic. Because at that point, modern medicine, the modernization of Western medicine was becoming more and more reductionistic. That means looking at the big part into the smallest and the smallest and the smallest and the smallest, but then omitting to look at the whole picture simultaneously, which is very difficult to do. And that's why osteopathy kind of put it back together as one unit. The body is one unit, body, mind, spirit. Treat the body as one person. You can't just treat the symptoms. You got to treat the person and understand where the problem coming from, so that we can understand the history and treat the person, not treat the symptom. And so that's pretty much the history of osteopathy. And then in early 1900s, Dr. Sutherland, who is an osteopath, got to understand this more specifically in relationship to the skull and the cranium, and to understand, the structure and the function and how those bones move and how the intracranial membranes, are going to move with the fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid, and looking pretty much at the intelligence of the system specifically. And so that he was the first cranial osteopath. And by the way, when he put his work into evidence after 30 years of research and looking at this whole structure and system, the osteopath pretty much mocked him, poo-pooed him, and just said, "This is nonsense," and they dismissed his work. Today, all the cranial osteopathic schools, because there are many of them, craniosacral schools, there are many of them, not just craniosacral therapy, there are many of them. Well, but I know craniosacral osteopathy and biodynamic, being an osteopath. All those schools come from osteopathy, from the work from Dr. Sutherland, of course, Dr. Still. But it's really interesting, because when you study Qigong, as I have, simultaneously as I have been studying craniosacral works and biodynamic therapy, that you understand, I understand, and I realize, like, oh my God, we're really talking about the same thing. We're talking about the same thing with different paradigms. I'm also bilingual, obviously. I'm French, English, bilingual. So when you learn, I know you speak also 2 languages. When we learn 2 languages, we have a different perspective of life, don't you think?
Absolutely. And here's the thing, perspectives can come whether we are bilingual or one lingual, we can have different perspectives as long as we are open to listening to where other people are coming from. So basically what you're talking about is the energy. So since you're talking about chi is about energy, so tell our listeners as to how can they consider chi in the context of self-care and healing.
That's beautiful. I mean, the way you brought it together and moved into this, I got this big aha to understand more about energy in the context of living in two different countries and seeing how two different cultures live life the same way. We just get up in the morning, we do life, we go to sleep at night, we eat, we pretty much do life the same way, but we do life differently, in different parts of the world because of the culture, because of the habits, because of the beliefs, because of the language. And that really expresses the energy of who we are in a different way. And so when we have the chance or the blessing, I would think it's a blessing to have being able to live in two different countries and experience, this in two different ways. We have a different sense of energy. That's exactly what it is. Because my definition of energy, because it can be, so broad of how far we can take this word, because everything is energy. Everything. I would say when it comes to health and medicine, I would say the difference is between a live body and a dead body. Very simple. Yeah.
Well, tell us the difference. I'm sure everybody's going to be curious about it.
Right? I mean, when life is gone, there's no more energy in this body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The body is still there. The bones can leave very
Yes.
long. But the person's soul, spirit, is no longer there. There were also research studies that was done to find out just before the person, they would weigh the person just before they passed and after the pass. See, there is weight in the soul. And the answer was no. The weight is the same. So what is she?
And what has changed is, as you mentioned, and as we talk about curiosity, is just kind of changing that perspective and bringing that there's shift in the energy. Whatever we want to call it, spirit, soul, has left. And it's very interesting when a person dies, even the doctors or people will say, you know what, transfer the body. They will not say transfer Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so.
Yes.
So tell us, we have talked about what it is. Now, how can people bring chi in their lives, and tell us how they can heal their bodies?
Yeah, I really enjoy how we are paralleling in this. It's really interesting. I really connect with the soul, your spirit in this process. It's really phenomenal to feel you. And right away, and it's in my book too, I think about habits. Because the culture and the way we do life, will create patterns and habits. And so, what I love, I love many, many definitions about Qigong, because Qigong being there's not an alphabet, but the words are very symbolic, and each word you can read a whole story by looking at a word. And so when you look at the word qi in Chinese, it's very beautiful to see that word, because qi means different things. Qi means the rice cooking in the crock pot with a fire underneath so that the rice can cook, the water can boil, and then steam on top. That's a symbol of qi. So it's really beautiful because it shows the symbology of it is so multidimensional. That first of all, it shows that as a process of cooking, it needs fire and then steam, which is also a byproduct of water. It needed water, the rice, to be able to cook. And then, it also means that in order to have the steam, you have to be able to put the fire on a hot, so that you can get to the boiling process. And then once you're in the boiling process is when you start getting the steam. Because if you don't get to the boiling process, underneath the crock pot. If you don't have enough fire, you never get the steam, you see. And if you don't have water and rice together in a crock pot, you'll never get the steam either. And so, but then the rice is also going to nourish you because it's, it's meant to be cooked properly to be able to get the proper nourishment. So when you look at all the symbols, you really understand, first of all, the culture, the cooking, which is a habit, that goes into the habit. A good habit, you're a good cook. If you don't cook good recipes and good food, and that's not good culture. That's not good for your bodies. That's not good for your sustenance. And then if you cook the water, if you boil the water on too hot, you're going to burn it. It's not, you have no more steam. So there's so much into this symbol of qi. And the sound itself, qi. The sound is qi. Why? Because it means you got to the steam. Qi means steam. That's what it means. It doesn't mean anything else. It means how you get to the steam, because that's the energy. That's when you get the energy, by the steam. So you have to be able to cook the rice properly in the crock pot and then have the right amount of fire. Yes, you have to put it on high, but then you turn it down because the rice has to cook for a long time to get, to the proper texture, the right amount. So I found this extremely amazing because in the symbol, you see so much about what it is to have a good life, a good energy, a good life force. And there's a principle of transmission. I just transmitted something to you here of this information. I had been receiving this information. It's been transmitted to me as well, etc. And those teachings are passed on the test of time. Why? Because they're valid. Anything that just doesn't last, it just doesn't have validity. It's not. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter, then it just kind of falls apart. Bones matter. If we're not cremated, bones can last a very long time. That matters. Interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting. So give us some tips that people can take this qi, which you explained so beautifully.
Thank you.
Love the analogy of rice and that. How can they give us some day-to-day practices that they can bring the healing? Because there's so much pain right now in the world. How can they bring that healing and peace to themselves?
Yeah. You have to really come into your own center, your own being, and feel yourself. You want to feel you. There are many ways to go about this. If you're interested in Qigong, that would be my recommendation, of course. NQA.org, National Qigong Association.org, is a good source. You can and there are a lot of teachers there, including me, who can teach Qigong. There also are the Craniosacral community. Craniosacral community, you can Google craniosacral therapy, whatever craniosacral biodynamic next to you, and get some work done, because those people can really help you. Now, for yourself, what I have discovered early on is meditation. And meditation is basically to learn how to quiet the mind, and then working with the breath to calm the breath, and also rooting. You want to root deep into the earth, especially at this time of the year for the people in the southern hemisphere. Or northern hemisphere, sorry. We're in winter phase. So in the winter phase, it's the bottom of the year, right? The bottom of the pit. So we want to root like the trees, kind of really, really go deep inside and feel your roots underneath the ground. Because when you do that, you shift the electromagnetic field. And then you can like literally like release a lot of energy that is not serving you. And you can send it down to the roots of the trees nearby. You can let go of what you don't need. You can understand with meditation, when you quiet the mind, you realize that a lot of the thoughts that you may have are transient and not needed to be thought. If you become the thinker and not the thought, that's the key. You want to ask yourself, are you the thinker or are you the thought? Because if the thinker doesn't like the thought, then you, the thinker, do you need to think the thought, the fear? Do you need to think that? Do you need to be worried? Do you need to be concerned? Or can you feel inside of yourself and trust that just like the animals around, you are taken care of. This is all the part of you that is taking care of you. And the more you trust that part, and the more you work with this part, the more you exercise this part of yourself, this part is going to work for you. And you see, and that's a Qigong practice, basically, when we get to acknowledge, to discover and cultivate the spaces within the spaces where the Qi is. And that's really what we get with those cultivations of craniosacral with Qigong. That's why I'm a big proponent of receiving craniosacral therapy on a regular basis and practicing Qigong.
Tell us this finishing story about Dorian, and where can people connect with you? Where can they find your book?
Thank you. Yes. So Dorian got to learn all of this early on. And I taught him Qigong. And, I took him to the masters, and he was very, very, very good at it. And so he lived, and he received plenty of craniosacral work from John Pledger, and as I mentioned earlier, groups, multiple hands-on work. He did so much work. So he lived a normal life, number one. That's really important. Because most kids, we call them the kids because they don't grow to be adults, never really lived on their own. They lived with their parents who were really protecting them because they're very weak. And but Dorian lived on his own. He graduated from college, magna cum laude. At 21, he was not even 22, from Florida Atlantic University, a big college in Florida. And he went and lived on his own. He had helpers. He organized his helpers. He was hiring them. I was there, I was a single mother. So I was hovering. I mean, his dad was there too, but kind of we were like facilitating his life so that he could live independently, because he was very smart and very funny. And anyway, so he lived to be just about 32. And he lived a very healthy, happy, rich life. And so we really didn't focus on, there was no illness. We were focusing on the making life as easy, as comfortable as possible, because there was no illness, there was no disease. He was a normal person. He just had, need for help part-time. That's all. But there was never a trace of illness in his life. He was born with a genetic flaw, and we were not going to try to spend his whole life trying to change the genes, because still today there is no gene therapy possible. There's hope, but there is no gene therapy possible. So lesson is here. It's like, be who you are, accept who you are. It doesn't mean that you're just limited to what you think that's what you are. Because you're probably you're a lot more than what you think you are. But don't try to be different than from who you are, because you're like, great, the way you are. There's only one like you. Become that person fully. That's what you're meant to be.
And that's so powerful that your son, from teenager, he accepted himself. Not only he graduated, I'm sure you're a very proud mama, and that he was independent. He became an inspiration to others. That's beautiful. So where could we find your book as we wrap up the show?
Yeah, so books. My book is everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it's also on the Harvard bookstore. But you can find it pretty much everywhere. So it's called Pathways to Consciousness Power, Craniosacral Qigong. Because this is my hand with his hand on front of, I don't know if you can see it. It's right there. This is my hand.
That's beautiful.
We had made a cast at a fair, and we didn't realize that was going to be such an important memory for us to have my hand and his hand. The sculpture, it's so special. And so I put on my book because it's because of my life with his life, that we were traveling hand in hand, that helped me understand those gifts and then put into words to be able to help and share with people to understand that you have many, many choices and possibilities for you to break through limits of pains of suffering. A pain of suffering is here because it's something that hasn't been resolved yet, but it will. It's in process. Trust it. Work with it.
That is beautiful. And thank you, Dr. Cloe, for sharing your insights and life story. And I want to celebrate your son. I want to celebrate your beautiful life. And my wonderful audience, I want to celebrate you, because without you, the show would not be possible. And I want to also celebrate Juan. Thank you for making the show technically possible. So know that you have the potential and that you can be who you are meant to be. So open up those possibilities. Be well and take care, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.